All right, just to make sure everybody knows where they are, we are ready to talk about taking learning outdoors. And we are so thrilled to have participants from each of the panels, kindergarten to grade 12, talk about their experiences outside and give you some tips and tricks. Some of you are already doing that so well. And so in the chat, you probably will be able to add your expertise. So as the topic comes up, make sure that it's a community that we're learning and mobilizing that knowledge. I love the quotation from Margaret Wheatley that says, "We are wise together." And if you took the AQ with me, you know that I refer to that often because I don't know the answer. So really, we need each other to learn. So I so appreciate you joining us and sharing your expertise as well.
People might be interested to know that we had over 600 people sign up for this webinar today. It's just a phenomenal number, and it shows you how much interest there is in outdoor learning right now.
I know. It is our best attended so far.
That's registered. We'll see how many actually show up because it's a busy
week. That's true. And you'll get to hear that our focus this year is on eco-justice to really respond to what's been going on in the world. And so you'll be excited to know about the upcoming webinars that we have planned for you. And we'll talk about those at the end of our session today. All right, so welcome everyone. If you haven't figured out where you've got an entry poll as you come in, so excited to have some expertise with us today of one from every division to talk about outdoor learning and what they've been doing and thinking about some of their strategies moving forward. We're just about ready to start, and as you know with Zoom already, or you may have heard, we've got a lot of folks coming in, and so we'll just make sure that everybody's on, that you've got your own microphone on mute. And obviously, if someone's speaking and you are video tired, you don't necessarily have to share your video. We'll put the recording on speaker view, so that way you can relax and enjoy the presentation. Does anybody want to share some virtual outdoor learning that they attempted in the COVID times last year that seemed to work? Diana, oh, go ahead, Steve. Perfect.
No one else jumped in, so I figured I would share a couple things. I did a bunch of stuff with photography during my virtual teaching in the spring when we were all locked out. And so different things where they would just, take, we did a black and white photo thing where they would take pictures of their community and wandering around. And I teach grade 5, 6, or 6. And so, a lot of the kids had cameras or phones or they could borrow from their parents. And so we did one like that. And we did another sort of quarantine portraits thing where they had portraits of themselves with all the things that they were kind of keeping them happy and keeping them busy during quarantine. So it was mostly stuff like that, but, using just basic digital technology and getting them to go outside and document stuff.
Great, thank you for sharing. Somebody else did a nature journal. Was that Georgina? Feel free to share, or if I put you on the spot.
Yes, sorry.
You didn't know you were hosting. How did that go, Georgina, your nature journal?
Yeah, so I think I looked up.
Georgina,
I looked up the native plants in my community, and this is what I did with my kids at home, and I think maybe if I have to, I'm going to try taking off my video. I think my video, yeah, video. So I looked up in my community various different types of plants and leaves. And so we went out and we matched them to the leaves and plants that the brochures were showing, and then sort of made like a little science journal and tried to organize them and categorize them. And it was interesting because we could see the change in the different seasons and how the plants changed and the leaves changed. And it was nice because the kids could go back in their journals and see that change and that learning.
Oh, how exciting. I know we did a series on nature journaling because it's so powerful for so many different things. If you don't get a chance to share verbally, remember our chat is there because you are also expertise in your own field. And so if I haven't said it already, we are wise together. And so it's great to have so many of us here with different stories. And feel free, there's opportunities to share at different times. We'll also be breaking up the webinar for questions, but at any time, feel free to put your questions into the chat. We have a couple of staff monitoring that. And I already see that some of our outdoor ed staff have reminded everyone about the Get Outside lessons, and I know David will be talking about those. Outside windows, grids. I ran into a Twitter account that does sidewalk chalk lessons, math outdoors with sidewalk chalk. Looks great. We are at 4:02, so I'll just pull up that poll. Oops, there we go. Okay, so we have, most of us are teaching K-3, or that we know, at 65%, juniors at 4 to 6 or 18%, intermediate 6%. We've got some seniors, about 3% of us. Educators in outside the formal schooling, so non-school setting, 4%, not an educator. And then of course some that teach multiple grades. Many people are somewhat comfortable with teaching outdoors, and that's 62%. And big whopping, how much do you plan to teach outdoors, is as often as possible. So that makes sense while you're here, because this will be a great time to learn some things. So that's 84%. I'm just going to end the polling now, although it won't track everybody. It gives us a good sample of who's in the room. And let me just turn this one. Great. So welcome everyone to our webinar calling Taking K-12 Learning Outdoors. And our overview today will be starting with, of course, a land acknowledgement, and we've obviously hopefully welcomed you and you feel warm and welcome into this community. Our experts today range from our central coordinating or assigned principal, David Hawker-Budlovsky, to teachers, as I mentioned, in every division. In our OISE ESE, related to Education for Sustainability, we have Hilary Inwood and Elise Kennedy with us. And our TDSB EcoSchool Central staff, Jen Vetter, Chris Metropolis, and myself are with you today. And of course, there's lots of TOES folks and lots of TDSB staff here. And at the end of our webinar, we'll take a look at what's coming up. We like acknowledging the land that we're in by really bringing attention to an artist, an Indigenous artist. So Coral Beam is the artist that we're focusing on today, and he was an artist who was born in the West Bay on Manitoulin Island. And he works in a variety of media to explore the tensions between Western and Indigenous relations. He referenced himself and places his native culture within broader surroundings by integrating personal memory with issues related to the environment, brutality, and rethinking of the ways histories are told. We acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. And as always, with a land acknowledgement, it's just a great place to start and ground ourselves in the land that was a gift that we now are on, and to really think about ways we can be working towards truth and reconciliation in our practice and in our personal lives. Before David starts us off, just want to tell you a little bit about David. He is a father of 2 elementary students in the TDSB schools, and a moment ago, he was the centrally assigned principal in the TDSB with responsibility supporting the Toronto Outdoor Education schools. He gave note about his new seconded position, and I'm sure he'll share that. David is entering his 22nd year with the TDSB. It's hard to know that he started when you were 2, David.
Absolutely.
And this is the 6th year in this particular role. This year will prove to be like no other and is committed to supporting a return to school which prioritizes mental health and well-being for all staff and students, which includes maximizing outdoor spaces as a key component to teaching and learning. David, you can just let me know when to turn.
Sure. Thanks for the introduction, Pam. And yeah, so added to my portfolio or areas of responsibility, I was announced today as the essentially assigned principal responsible for the LC3 virtual elementary school. So I will remain with my duties responsible and overseeing outdoor education with a team of staff there, but also will be very engaged with the virtual schools and the TDSB. I'm really excited to be presenting today with so many teachers. So I really want to take the time to really highlight a few resources that we've put together as an outdoor education department and our commitment to supporting the system moving forward, but really want to leave most of the time with the teachers here today, because really there's a lot of expertise in the room. And I'm glad, Pam, as people were entering the room, you were asking about how can we engage in outdoor learning in the virtual setting and having some people share their ideas. Now going to be directly involved in the virtual schools, I too will be supporting getting students, whether in schools or out in virtual schools, participating in activities and learning that starts and is based on the land. Like all teachers, I have dreams / nightmares about what school is going to look like, and this year is like no other. So there's even more dreams. And last night I was in bed at about 2 a.m. and started thinking that if I had the opportunity to be in a school this year, knowing that we've been apart from each other for so long, what would that look like? And really, it would start with building community and connections with the students. And, you know, I have 2 kids in they're going into grade 2 and grade 5. You can tell them what 2 meters is, but they have no idea what 2 meters is. And just thinking about getting the group outside, showing them what 2 meters is, and doing virtual handshakes and socially distant handshakes to do greetings. I think that would be fun. Get them outdoors and get them connected with each other in a way. So that's where my mind was last night, and I thought I would share that with so many teachers on the call today. So my first 5 slides, thanks Pam, are really about what the outdoor education department has committed to support our return to school. I'm going to fly through these first 5 slides. I'll talk a little bit to them and then offer any opportunity for questions. So outdoor education staff are prepared to be a resource for school staff and support the use of outdoor spaces in teaching and learning, both in person and virtually. And we started to do this in the spring through the development of resources and outreach, and we'll continue to do that moving forward. I will say that along with myself, a number of the teaching staff have already been redeployed. So our secondary staff have been redeployed to the secondary virtual school, and our elementary teachers are currently, like many of you, in limbo to see where they will land for this school year, at least to start. Virtual schools, regular schools are remaining in the department, but regardless of the quote-unquote teaching staff, there are a number of outdoor education specialists that will continue to be there, ready to support the system as the outreach comes. So the next slide, Pam.
Oops, did I go too far? I added a picture for you.
Ah, thank you so much. Didn't recognize it. So we're prepared, the outdoor education staff are prepared to offer full day excursions that can take place within your schoolyard or the local community. And so if you go to the outdoor education website, and I'm going to put that up on the screen at the end of this, there you will see a tab that has been created about local programming that is available. So as all of us know, outdoor excursions of any kind to start the school year have been put on pause. I am very hopeful that as things get into the groove and we see things be nice and stable with the return to school, excursions will again be a reality. And when that does happen, we will be ready to welcome staff and students to our outdoor education centers for day visits. There has been a decision across the system that there will be no overnight excursions until January.
Great.
And again, we'll be revisiting that.
And when you talk about outdoor excursions being booked, when you talk about kindergartens, they are still using the community, but they're not going on buses. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. So again, schools are encouraged to use their schoolyard as much as possible, and I will understand and need to acknowledge how difficult that is going to be in elementary schools as we are working with staggered entry, staggered recesses, staggered lunches, staggered dismissal. We know that some schools are going to have far greater challenges in accessing that school proper place. But leaving that school proper place is allowed. And in the TDSB, we would use the 511H form, the walking excursions, that would allow us to access the immediate community. Really supporting that, the City of Toronto has made it available for schools to access all their parks and green spaces. And again, on the outdoor education website, we've put a link that overlays all the city parks and schools, as well as there is a list, in case you find the map hard to read because it is a very large area, of every city park within 100 meters of your school. So those are, again, resources that are there. So yes, local excursions into your green spaces are allowed. And again, it's going to be working with your school principal to see where that lands. But they are allowed. There are no volunteers. I saw that, or parents. So again, we need to be working with our principal. Where are those green spaces? What are the types of activities that you are going to be engaging in? Because it is the fall, there is so much wonderful things happening outside, looking at changes, our environment, that can be very low risk. Again, it depends the area you're in. I've been in many downtown schools over the last couple of weeks and know that the yards are very small, and within their community, there are parks, but there will be many schools that are sharing the use of those parks. So again, ensuring that there is coordination to make sure that we are able to share the space.
Great. David, you're getting a lot of chatter on chat. Before I know the next slide is the Get Outside slide. Perhaps we could talk about what is considered a walking excursion. Obviously, if you have secondary students, their capacity to be outside longer is greater compared to kindergarten students. And I know Trish will be addressing the bathroom issue for kindergarten students, but perhaps in terms of distancing first under the 511H.
So there is no distance it within the excursion procedure. The policy says a walking excursion in the immediate community. So again, that immediate community is going to look different for a kindergarten student or a grade 12 student. It is incumbent upon the teacher leading the trip to share the itinerary with the principal as to where that's happening. So again, what's the nature, what are the learning goals of the trip, and then having that discussion. What I will say, and I've said this in every piece of communication I've been able to put out, communication with your community is so important. Letting your students and your parents and your administration know what your intentions are so that you can be prepared. And the more communication, the greater setup early in the school year you can do, the easier it's going to be, because we do know we live in a climate that has 4 seasons. We want to ensure that going outside isn't going to happen on a day like today where it's 20 or 22 degrees, but we're going to go outside when it's -5 degrees as well, and when it's snowing, and if there's a bit of a drizzle. And how can we prepare for those types of things? And I'll speak to some strategies that we've put up to help people get started. And I know as our staff get back to work, we'll continue to add more resources.
Great. And
some other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, one last thought before we leave this slide. If a principal is unaware that local parks are available or those spaces, where would they go to find that information so that they can be confident, both the principal and the teacher can be confident that they're following protocols?
So every principal received an email from the TDSB planning department last week stating that it was the city that announced that they were making their parks available to schools without permits. And there is a process. So if a school, so for example, my kid's school is adjacent to a large park, that school is planning to run all of their health and physical education classes in that field. In lieu of the permit process, the city has asked schools to inform them of which parks they are using. And it's strictly in the form of an email to the TDSB's planning department. So every principal was sent that email last week.
Wonderful. All right, we'll move on from that. And again,
okay.
Those of you who still have those questions, I see a lot of bathroom questions, and I'm going to ask our panel of experts for each grade to speak to the bathroom issue. And let me just move your slide forward.
Thank you. So every year, the outdoor education department has really wanted to support getting outside every year, not just during COVID times. So over the last 7 or 8 years, the outdoor education department has supported Get Outside Month in the TDSB. That's every May. And all of those lessons have been archived on our website. And so it's on our website, Get Outside Month lessons. Last year, our focus was on climate change. I know Pam was talking about that earlier, about environmental justice. The year previously, Indigenous education. We've also done a monthly theme on wellness, literacy, numeracy, social studies, STEM. So these are there. There's over 150 curriculum-based lessons. The math was done a few years ago, so it doesn't directly tie to the new elementary math curriculum, but there are people already looking at that and working on some ideas to support others in doing that as well. So really encourage you to do that. I would say that these work best for those of us that are going to be teaching in brick and mortar, but definitely some of the activities are easily applicable if teaching and learning in the virtual environment as well. If you, the next slide, Pam, if you are in the virtual environment, last year, the outdoor education staff really wanted to help ensure people were still going outside as we were in lockdown, and created this Learn from Home with Outdoor Ed resource. And that started last April with a mere 40 activities posted there. There are 88 posted there currently and will continue to grow. These are activities that are designed to be done from a window from wherever you live, a balcony, a backyard, a local green space, whatever you have access to. There are different activities supported there, as well as through the month of May and June. One of our sites, the Scarborough Outdoor Education School in Kearney, put a monthly list of daily list of activities for the entire month of May and June. Again, little pieces encouraging the students to get outside, everything from taking pictures like Steve was sharing earlier, or journaling, to making solar ovens. There is a whole breadth of that, and I noticed earlier that Monica Nelson is one of the participants here today, and was part of the leadership team that pulled that together, along with some other outdoor ed staff. And if others are here, I'm sorry if I've missed you.
Great. David, there was a question about French, and yep. I'm just wondering, the outdoor ed specific lessons are not in French, but perhaps one of our staff could type in Eco Schools Canada has outdoor French lessons, as well as the Back to Nature Network has French lessons. And both of those guides are available. All those resources are electronically available, and maybe Jen or Chris could look those up, or Elise, and put those into the chat.
Excellent. Thanks.
Okay. Moving forward there.
Thanks. So the other thing that a few of our staff, and I see that Krista's here as well, were joining classrooms that were virtual. So Krista was going right into wild local green spaces, looking at the flora and fauna in different ponds. Richard, one of our specialists at Kearney, were looking at the geology and wellness and some mapping. I know Biz, is someone else on the line, had Mike and Catherine, a couple of our staff, go in last year to do things with her class. So again, we're also there to support the online learning as well. And just like we encourage people in regular or normal school times to bring the outdoors in, the same thing, how can we bring the outdoors into the virtual environment as well? So again, those are available as well by contacting Outdoor Ed. Through our website, you can link directly to the Get Outside and Learn from Home lessons, also some strategies, but you can email me and I'll pass it through the department at TOES, TOES, at tdsb.on.ca. So the final slide that I think I had was, we're trying to put as much out there for people as possible. So again, this is the website that I've been referring to often through the presentation. We on the website, we are outlining the supports that outdoor education are supporting to schools that I've just gone through. There are some supports and strategies to support outdoor learning, ideas about lending libraries for proper gear, starting small, starting in your comfort zone, and building from there. Again, making sure regular communication with your community, sharing of plans, and those sorts of things. Over the summer, a number of other resources came out that we wanted to link up. The Council for Outdoor Educators of Ontario created a great little monograph that they published in August about outdoor learning tips. They also did a webinar for taking kindergarten outside. OFIA, especially for our secondary teachers, an excellent outdoor education toolkit was released, and the maps that I was talking about earlier are posted there as well. So that's the end of the formal part of my piece. So if people have any questions, continue to follow us on social media, and really want to help encourage as many people as possible to get outside.
Great. David, only just because of time, and we did
Yep.
spend some time on excursions. If people still have questions about excursions, etc., I'll encourage them to put them in the chat. As I said, washrooms will be addressing as each of the presenters come up and talk about their experience. And if you've missed something, just scroll up the chat and see if it's been answered. But of course, this recording will be available too. So thank you so much, David.
And I will just for washrooms are a big issue on the map of the city parks. If you go to the city's website, it also tells you which amenities are available within their park. So if you know the park that you want to go visit to, look it up and it will tell you if washrooms are available there and whatnot.
Okay, and perhaps could you just repeat the information about the parks, because it seems to be a bit of confusion, because normally we would need permits. Could you just repeat that again?
So the city of Toronto made the announcement that they are making all city parks available without permit to schools during the school day. And this is for CDSB as well as TDSB. So yeah, no permits required. If you are using the parks on a regular basis, so perhaps you're a phys ed teacher, science teacher, planning to be outside in a specific park, the city has asked principals to submit the name of that park, what it's being used for, and when. And it's just an email internally from your principal to our TDSB planning department. That's all that's required.
Wonderful. Thanks again, David. All right, so next up we have Trish Bavitz, and we are speedingly along. There's so much to cover, but Trish comes to us. She's teaching kindergarten, actually teaching grade 1-2 this year at Muirhead Public School. She's a graduate of Eric Jackman Institute Child Studies, and she's taught in the TDSB for 25 years, and half of which have been in kindergarten and FDK. She loves utilizing the environment as a third teacher and is planning on teaching outside most of the year. So welcome, Trish.
Thanks so much, and it's a privilege to be here with such a great group of people. And thanks for everything that everyone's doing. These are unprecedented times, and also exciting times, because we can get out of our classroom and we have permission to do so. So I'd like to just start out by encouraging everyone to get your students in FDK running and moving and plan those activities first thing in the morning. That way it will help your students to focus for the day, especially if they're living in close quarters in apartments or in cramped spaces. They need that outdoor exercise. This next point touches on washrooms. If you wrap your outside time to the beginning of the day and the end of the day, then your kids will be dressed, and you can ask your parents to have them toileted before they arrive, and then before they leave, make sure they go to the washroom. I will skip the next slide because it's a kit. And then this is really a backpack for the kids. And the key part of this that I wanted to emphasize is that, and it's not on here, but if you communicate with your families and send pictures of what you think they will need, and tell them that every day we go outside. And if you start your day outside and the parents see that you're exercising first thing, they will come dressed and they will be prepared. The pictures on the right, I recommend, that just on the right, I've given a little collage. I encourage everyone to create little outdoor kits. If you use plastic that's a bit malleable that the kids can put in their backpacks, they won't break. And I encourage you, with kindergarten, you can choose one spot in the community, go to that one spot, but change their materials in their kits so that you can use a journal. But each time they go back, It could be a visual journal, and you give them crayons for one time. Next time you give them watercolor paints, oil pastels, and you change it up. The other thing is with young children, if you encourage them to focus, you can see in the top right-hand corner, I've given a little rope in the kit that you have to talk about rope safety and that it stays on the ground and it's only for our hands. But that each child would get that, and then they can lay it out in a shape and then draw what they see in that shape. Okay, next slide.
Okay.
And then the environment is your study. If you listen carefully to the children, they will lead you to what your curriculum will be. And arts are a rich medium, and they provide lots of opportunities. And these two examples are a pestle and mortar, which you could have as an outdoor kit, or you could take it back to your class and disinfect it per use. But encourage the kids to take leaves and create paints and inks from the leaves, the tannins in the leaves. And that was just using lemon juice and water, and a paintbrush is there, and the kids can create their own. Okay, I'm going fast. This is an example. I would say start small, stay close to your school, because if you do need to go to the washroom, you do have your ECE team in FDK, which is awesome, because when I first started out doing this, I was out on my own with 25 kids in the morning and 25 in the afternoon, going outside by myself. So we're lucky to have our ECE partners. And you can start with your routines, set your walking routines. It takes 28 days. Be patient with that. It will take time, but it pays off in the front if you bookend with lots of if you take the time and patience to do that, and go back to the same spot, study the seasons, adopt a tree in your yard, and and look at the birds, the bugs, lichens. You go back each time using the thinking protocol. What do you see, think, and wonder? And then with your team, evaluate with the kids. How do you think we're doing on our trips? To the left is a collage that the kids can do. So I'm trying to embed pictures. They will get these slides, right, Pam?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, they won't, but they'll get the webinar so they can see the slides.
Okay, great. So then also, as you can increase the distance as you feel safe to do so. Pick a tree in the park, adopt it, care for it, repeat what we just did, especially that looping back and coming forward. There's lots of rich development with critical thinking skills and the kids can compare the trees. Then you can extend it. It might be 2 coniferous trees or 2 deciduous trees, or 1 of each, the seasons, etc. Past that. And then here's just a math embedded in math. It's collections. If you give each child a collection bag or box that they can collect what something in their environment, then they can sketch it, bring it back to the class. I just ask that maybe they return it back to the environment they took it at, because if we're all going out into the park and pillaging the leaves, there's not going to be a lot left. So
and just to interrupt you, someone was asking about the tree survey, perhaps not useful at the kindergarten level, but absolutely under your facility services site. Jen, maybe you could just put a sample link to how they can get there to get their tree surveys. They are getting old, but they're still very useful.
I've used those with my MID class in junior as well, and it's great data. This is just an example of going deeper into the inquiry. So the students, when they look at the trees, then they started noticing different shadows that they had. So I took a book, Shadow Chasers, and it's the inquiry question is, do you think trees have a shadow? And then this is a child explaining the shadow and the light. The sun on the right is hotter, so the shadow is longer. So he's theorizing there. And I encourage you to do that with the students. Sorry, I'm going so fast. This is where I really want to get to, because it speaks to what David was talking to earlier. This was in the Thorncliffe Park catchment, and it's studying the urban environment. And I really encourage you to shift your kids to develop their math skills and do it through play. But as you go out in the environment, it's amazing how they develop their 2-dimensionality and 3-dimensionality. And if you can create activities that go from, you can see in the top left, there's 2-dimensional drawings. Then there's shapes that they were mapping out their buildings. That's what those shapes were on the table. But you could do this outside as well. on a blanket, and then they each made a diorama which brought it to the third dimension. So it just they took those home and they each had their own diorama, but you also could do this virtually. You could have the kids do this at home in their own neighborhoods. And finally, it was one more. Oh no.
I may have missed it. Sorry, Trish.
No, it's okay. It's the one. Is it not in there?
Let me just go back.
No, it's not. Okay. Can I share? Or we don't have time.
You could, while people are putting questions in the chat, I'll take 2 questions for Trish. Trish, what were you thinking of sharing?
Well, it's a model. The students, they did a wax resist and watercolor painting of, we used Hundertwasser as our inspiration, who is a visual artist as well as he's an architect as well, and he greened the roofs. And so I asked the students to reimagine Thorncliffe Park as with green roofs. And so they created their own, as they were building their buildings with blocks, they drew their drawings with wax resist, and then they watercolored it with the green roofs, and then they made a 3-dimensional model of that as a whole class.
Wonderful.
And then we made a PSA because we found out there was a lot of garbage. So then it was a personal service film that we made from that. So
That's
there's
awesome.
lots of things you can do.
Yeah, perhaps after you finish presenting, you could put a link to that particular artist. So thank you, Trish. You've covered bathrooms, you've covered arts, you've covered, just how to develop kids' learning. I'm just going to move on, but if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and Trish will monitor that and look for things that she can answer. So way to go, and way to be the speed talker of the century. So next up, hang on. Steve Richmond is coming up as our second expert in the junior division. Steve, you teach at Blake Public School in Toronto. You have a passion for environmental education and believes empowering students to be active voices for the issues that they care about. And what a great age to do that. You use a social justice lens to facilitate your students' exploration of the world around them. And that really gives them so many varied experiences that help them come to their own conclusions about how they can best support and nurture their community. You've worked from ESL to garden programs to many different grades, and you obviously are trying to get your kids outside as much as possible. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's great to be here, and I feel honored to be with such a great group of other educators. And one of the things about outdoor education is it sort of feels like something that can be really daunting, even to me and to probably many of us when you start thinking about a new year and teaching in a pandemic and teaching outside. There's a lot of things to consider, and it can feel daunting. But my hope is to try to help everyone relax into it a little bit. I feel if everyone's a little more prepared and willing to sort of just get outside, it becomes easier the more you do it, and the more you do it, the more comfortable you be. And that leads to that first slide where I'm talking about preparation. And one of the most important things, I think, is to keep kids comfortable and keep teachers comfortable, because if people are comfortable, they're going to be more able to be there for the long haul and not get distracted. So, proper clothing is essential depending on the weather, and that's something that changes a lot. Like right now, it feels like it's like late fall weather, and it's pretty cool, and it's like a little misty in the morning, and the ground is wet. Well, students need to be prepared for that. And so there's a lot of different questions that you're going to sort of just have to ask yourself as a bit of a checklist before you go outside. How will you sit? Are you sitting? Are you just walking? If you're sitting on grass, is it going to be wet? Then maybe you need something to sit on. So that I put up there sit-upons as a question mark, and that can be a lot of different things depending on what you have. But what I'm planning on doing for my class this year is I'm going to cut up some old tarps that I have that got a couple holes in them from some fires near camping trips, and just make like a small little square, maybe 2 feet by 2 feet that will fit a bum, and the kids could carry them in their backpack or in a bag. And that will just give them something to sit on when they get to a grassy place that might be a bit wet. And again, this is just trying to make everyone comfortable. There are lots of other options for sit-upon. Sometimes people use placemats that they get at the dollar store. And other times people have, milk crates or other things like that. But, just thinking about that stuff ahead of time, depending where you're going.
Great.
Other folks,
Steve, just
go
to
ahead,
interrupt, just a request that you lean into your mic a little bit more. That'd be great. And then could you just quickly address the bathroom issue for junior students?
Yes, I'll definitely get the bathrooms. Is that a bit louder? Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so couple more things. I'll get the bathrooms, I promise. How will you work? I'm going to be using a lot of clipboards, but hardback notebooks really work well. Other times, though, you can do digital notation. My class has 4 iPads in our tech cart, so I can, day by day assign different students to be sort of a photographer, and they could take pictures of things that the group that they're working with could use, and that's a way that you can sort of leave the clipboards at home and just gather information or gather leads. Let's go back one slide. Sorry, not there yet.
Sorry. Yeah.
So that's sort of how you work, and that's sort of something you're going to have to figure out. And I'll talk a little bit about more of that when I talk to activities. Things that kids need to bring: water, sunscreen. If you're going to be out during, lunch, they might need a snack or their lunch. Obviously, students should be always traveling with their masks, so that even if you're outside, you might need to go inside or be in a close quarters and want your mask. And also, as a teacher, I'd have a big bottle of hand sanitizer with me so that we can always sanitize if people touch things as they go. Now, bathrooms. I'm going to touch on that for a couple minutes, because even for me, I find it so challenging. When I taught a kindergarten class and we used to go in the ravine, there'd always be a kid or two that needed to go to the bathroom. And that was a big thing because the school's too far away to go back. There were no bathrooms in the ravine, and that made it really tricky to go too far with kindergarten. And that I guess is what I'm sort of leaning towards. It depends on your age, it depends on your school and your location. So for my class, I'm going to start with pretty short trips, maybe half an hour, go for a walk, come back, get them used to all going to the bathrooms before they go, and let them know, sorry, you can't go till you come back. I mean, if you have an emergency and you need to turn around, you deal with that at the time. But generally, I found that as long as you set clear expectations up at the beginning, that there isn't going to be a bathroom visit till they come back, then everyone goes, and then you try to get them back soon enough. As you build up their comfortableness, you can start to extend that time a little bit, and just keep in mind when you have to check back. And then, as David mentioned, looking at what park you're going to, what facilities are there, and what bathrooms could be accessible. So by my school, there's a park right next to a community center. I'll be in touch with the community center to make sure they're okay with us using the bathroom when we go there, if that's necessary. I noticed Chris mentioned in the chat, first aid kit can't hurt. 100% that should have been on my list. Always have some Band-Aids and something else, like, not much, mostly just Band-Aids and maybe some paper towel or something. Bloody noses can be a big issue that I've experienced, and so sometimes just having a paper or a handkerchief to help with that. All right, so I'm going to move on to that.
Yep. Keep going.
All right, so stewardship. So one thing that I'm really hoping to work on this year is to pick a local space to use for regular outdoor education, somewhere that we're returning to many, many times throughout the year, so we can see how the seasons change, so we can see how that park is used, use that for data management, talking about how park space is used, but also to make that park a better space, to work with it, do cleanups. One big thing I want to work on is invasive species identification and remediation, so pulling a lot of dog strangling vines out of parks, getting rid of those seed pods and garbage cans, but also doing art in the park and posting it up, messaging, and maybe some guerrilla gardening, different ways to improve that space and make it better and give students ownership. Let's move to the next slide. Just really quickly, COVID-19 is our reality, so let's not avoid it too much. I don't want to be doom and gloom all the time, but since we are going to be wearing masks so much, let's talk about the impact of those masks on wild spaces, on public spaces, how to remediate that, and I think you can also do some fun projects, whether advocacy or making masks, etc. All right, let's jump to the next slide. Someone said, what is guerrilla gardening? That's where you plant things out in nature on your own without necessarily having it be your garden, but planting wildflowers. We use seed bombs, which you can make with seeds and clay, and you can make little balls, and then you can spread those around. And then, I mean, it's better in the spring, but then you're going to have these little pockets where wildflowers start popping up. You're going to want to make sure they're native to this area so that you're not creating more invasive species. I know I'm running short on time, so I have this math ideas slide. And math, it's like, I think there's so much to do outside. So, you know, you can make sets of counters with acorns. You can practice estimating everything around you. You can use chalk on walls and on the ground to solve math problems. You can use clocks and time people running or time cars. Use that with mean, median, and mode. You can find patterns in nature, represent them in numbers. You can grow and shrink patterns. Again, estimating distances and then measuring them. Measurement is so good outside because it becomes so alive. You can measure things, bring yardsticks, bring string. You can make maps, plan different uses of the playground, make shapes using string and measure them, solve for perimeter and area. So I'm not going to read them all because I got other slides, but it's just endless the ways that you can take any idea and make it work outside. Now, language, I find, I keep going back to what I might do in the classroom, you know, like doing a group read aloud, doing guided reading circles, but you can take it outside and you can just enjoy that. You can bring a book, you can bring a notebook, people can do journal writing, people can give book talks or do reader's theater, but just do it outside. And a lot of it's not much different than in the classroom. So it's just about adapting it for that space. How do you make sure kids are loud enough? We have a train in our yard, which is so loud. So I know we're gonna have to pause every 10 minutes when the train goes by, but that's okay. You get used to it, you create the expectations, and you make it work, because hopefully it's more fun too outside. All right, let's move to the next slide.
Great. And Steve, I'm sorry to cut you short. You have 1 minute.
All right. So use what is around you is my big message. Use your community, your space. The next one, just because we are in a pandemic, it doesn't mean the climate crisis is over. Don't forget that we have, like, California, the whole West Coast is burning. We have so much going on now that's directly linked to climate change. We're living in the beginning of it. So please use it. Be an advocate. Get out there. Last year, my class got to meet Justin Trudeau and bring a letter to talk about pipelines and why we need to be doing more to improve our environment and give kids that voice and that agency, and they will love it. Keep it positive. Be solution-oriented. That's what kids need. They need to be optimistic about the future, but have a voice over how it's going to go, because it is their world. Have fun. And if you have questions, let me know.
Okay, great. And again, as always, if you have questions for Steve, stick them in the chat and he'll take time to do that. So next up, we have Christiana, and she is a grade 7-8 teacher. She calls herself a whimsical science teacher and an environmental ed. She's a helpful colleague, quirky friend, compassionate daughter, loving sister, keeper of the world. She's been working for the past 15 years in the West End at Holycrest Middle School, and always looking at keeping kids outside. So let me just move ahead to you, Christiana. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Actually, we're going to jump to the third slide just in the interest of time, and we're going to jump right into it and get started. So we're going to look at a teaching and learning checklist. So again, as a lot of you have already mentioned, you're going to start off by looking at what you actually have. And,
this one?
Okay. Yeah, there you go. What you have, and you're going to assess your schoolyard and your ground space. And I want, basically, because you are teaching with a space that you have available. So scan your yard and look at the opportunities within your schoolyard space. What features can you use? Do you have a concrete pad that you can use as a gathering point or an area that you can put your materials? What green space are students specifically going to be exploring? Is it the garden or some type of naturalized area? And remember David's list of the local city parks within 100 meters of your school. Remember, that's covered by your 511 walking excursion permission form. Think about doing some team teaching. Hey, over on the right, there's Laura Yez and I over at Warren Park a few years ago. And remember what we talked about? Safety first. Always make sure that the area is clear of hazards. Make sure you've got your first aid kit and any students who need their EpiPens, and are going to take them with them. In terms of strategies that do work, what I'd like you to do is making sure that you establish some sort of routines for going outside.
Sorry.
And That's coming up with ground rules, and I like to come up with them collectively with my students. Bathroom breaks, I know we've talked, we always do them pre and post, so we've got ourselves covered. Office always knows where we are, so we're grabbing our walkie-talkie or my cell phone. And when I'm instructing, remember you're standing so that the student's eyes are not in the sun and the wind is in your back, so your voice will actually carry. I've learned that the hard way. Think about implementing a student buddy system and establishing some type of central meeting point and your working boundaries, so if you want to use pylons or trees. Also think of a method to call your students back to a main gathering point. Think about it. You could use your rubber chicken, your PE whistle. Hillary's gonna love this one. You got your goose or your duck whistle as well. And just to get a little fancy here, you also got your turkey call. I still need practice on those as well, but remember, make it interesting for them. Teachable moments will come up, so do take advantage of them. Remember about your TDSB land acknowledgement, but I also want you to teach beyond it as well. Again, expect trial and error because it will happen, and you're going to be evaluating what works for you and what doesn't work for you as you develop your own approach, as you're exploring your grounds at school. And do remember that you're working within that minds-on, hands-on, and consolidation framework as well. Next, please. In terms of considerations, I mean, every September you get to know your students and their families. So what you could do is consider a questionnaire for students and their parents, and you want to garner some diagnostic data from them in terms of attitudes, beliefs, comfort levels, and misconceptions where it comes to outdoor education. Be cognizant, though, that there are varying cultural and personal attitudes towards the outdoors. The word outside means very many different things to very many different people. And ultimately, though, children have the right to explore and play in the outdoors because research shows that kids who spend time regularly outside in nature are healthier and happier. And that's out of the Ontario Children's Outdoor Charter. The data that you do collect eventually, it will help you inform your daily teaching practices and help you tackle some misconceptions that you can address during your knowledge building circles. Another one that you may want to consider is writing a letter to parents and indicating that outdoor education will be part of their child's programming for the year. You want to outline the purpose, the curriculum connections, the expectations, and the needs, such as let's say clothing that is okay to get dirty in, or an old pair of boots or running shoes. Do approach, though, the procurement of appropriate outdoor clothing with sensitivity. There are students from various socioeconomic backgrounds. So some ideas that were already thrown around, such as the lending library, thinking about anything at school that can be laundered and sent out. Really reach out to your staff for any gently used apparel that can be donated. Take some time to talk to your guardians, and there could be some thrift store options as well. Do discuss with students and post reminders on Google Classroom regarding your outdoor apparel, and really get the fashionistas in your classroom to help you out. Trust me, it works.
Christiana, as I move on to your next slide, there is a question about the survey, and I'll let you answer that when you're back in the chat, but that's a good one to ask them about positive and challenging stories in the outdoors.
Absolutely. Okay. So for our special needs students, we've got to be prepared to make sure we adapt and modify. And the points that you see actually on this slide are summarized directly from an amazing article, which you're going to go back and read. It's from Green Teacher. It's indicated below by Dominguez and Schilling, and it's entitled Connecting Students with Special Needs to the Environment. In the interest of time, I am going to move on, but please, please make sure you read it. Let's move on, Pam. The next thing I want to talk about is you assessing the equipment that you need and really what you need to source. So go ahead and in your classroom, figure out an area for outdoor equipment collection and throw it up on a utility cart, and you've got everything on there that you need. And also think about incorporating digital technology. The one warning that I'm going to go ahead and say is figure out where you're connected and your dead zones for Wi-Fi are within your outdoor space, because it will limit you. Make sure you bring your camera, because you are capturing, commemorating, and celebrating students in action. You will be disseminating this information via Google Classroom to your guardians so they can see what their children are up to during the day, and also to the greater school community via the Twitter page. But also do remember that media, the student media release form as well. For those of you who are going to be working virtually, select activities that can be done in a variety of settings with minimal equipment. Do poll your students about their access to green space. For some of them, it might be like a simple windowsill of potted plants. For others, it's an apartment balcony, a home backyard, or even a local park. So I want you to work with what's available with them. Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about engagement. So I want you to think about your framework. Think about what thematic unit you're working on or subject curricular unit you're working on, and ask yourself, how do I integrate outdoor education seamlessly into what I'm doing? The big tip that's come across from our discussions right now: start small, shorter stints, establish routines, and build. Could be something as a simple read out loud or an independent work period outside, but then you want to delve a little bit deeper. We talked about exploring nature journaling, which teaches students how to tune into nature and really observe it. And also think about revisiting those spots throughout the seasons to document change. And your resources are on the right-hand side that you see. So inquiry takes place through student exploration of their environment, through their observations, and student inquiry questions start developing from there. And it's just like the layers of an onion. You start peeling them back and you start uncovering the curriculum. So the key here is, sorry?
Christiana, if you've got 1 minute and we've got 3 slides, have you got one that you'd like me to focus on?
Well, I wanted people to jump to the very end then.
Okay.
We talked a lot about photography. We also had the nature-based collages as well that Hillary has addressed in her website, and some community programs that are out there that our school has used, which is Gallery 44, which is camera links. And the key idea when it comes to photography is that there is power in the visual, and in order to tell stories, and we can advocate for change through that. So I want you to harness it, and I want you to remember that the sky's the limit. So take a moment right now, all of you, close your eyes, envision your classroom. I want you to imagine a place of wonder, of mystery, and discovery. Think about an environment that speaks to young children's inherent curiosity and innate yearning for exploration. Your classroom is where children will be passionate about learning and love school. Open up your eyes. Is there no better way of achieving this than taking students outside? Obviously. There we go. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, Christiana, thank you so much. And I'm sorry that we didn't get to all the wealth of information. It's very similar to everyone. We are at 4:59 or 5 o'clock. We have Karen Stelling yet to present. And so at this point, if you need to go, you have family commitments, we encourage you. This is so exciting that we've got so much to talk about, and I'm hoping that this has helped. Again, it is recorded. We'll record the whole thing, so we will send it to everyone if you need to go. But before we leave, Karen, you're next. And Karen Stelling is a high school teacher. Sorry, I'm just pulling up. She's been teaching with 14 years and is currently the assistant curriculum leader of science at Riverdale Collegiate. She has a broad range of experience teaching chemistry, science, geography, and e-learning in grades 9 to 12. Sorry, Karen enjoys taking secondary students outdoors, which is actually a huge feat, and is looking forward to the challenge of incorporating outdoor education in the new secondary quadmaster teaching structure. Karen, you're on.
All right, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
All right, I'll talk really fast. So I've been experimenting with getting students outside for some time. And I used to call it Freedom Friday. I take them outside every Friday, and it was mostly in geography classes. So I'm going to share a little bit about that, as well as some ideas of how to use outdoor education in the quadmaster system. So the next slide. So you have to work with what you have. This is my school, Riverdale Collegiate. You can see that it's virtually got no school grounds that aren't paved. There's a field that has a high fence around it. And it's really important to just work with what you have. It is, though, in a vibrant neighborhood with other green spaces. So I use my walking excursion form to take students further afield. But I do begin usually on school grounds. Next slide.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
So this is just me talking about some dog strangling mine, I believe, but we do need to make sure we are spaced out. it is a different kind of challenge that we're going to have, because usually they gather around so they can hear you. And I like the idea of speaking downwind. So that's just one more thing that you need to adjust for, is speaking to a group outside will be more spaced out. Another really important thing that I taught students before, because we are in the downtown east side, there's a lot of the public around, and there's also only a limited amount of, say, sidewalk space if you're going somewhere. And so it's important to actually teach your class how to be a good citizen on the sidewalk, and walk on the right-hand side of the sidewalk and make way for wheelchairs and strollers and others. And this is even more important now that with COVID, that we have to also interact with the public. So if I'd be talking about something in the middle of the street, we'd make sure to kind of gather in a place where people could still walk and get by. So the next slide. So technology, don't fight it. So use it. I know Steve talked a little bit about using digital recording. Almost every kid has a phone or a friend with a phone. And actually Hillary taught me to use Instagram. So it was banned for a couple of years, but we got by somehow. So what I had my grade 9 geography students do is look at the landscape through a certain lens. So, and then give them a hashtag that has, you can, go to the next slide, Pam, where you call it something. I usually call it something with a course code, and then something else. I also encourage students to make a course code for my class, because then I say, like, oh, you don't want to see what I'm eating, or I don't even have Instagram work, but I'll say they'll sometimes be embarrassed about maybe sharing their school photos on their personal Instagram. So if they make a school Instagram, then they can feel more free to post what they want. And then what you can do is log back in the classroom and bring up all the photos that the students have just taken. And so this particular one, they had to look for human environmental connections. And so this was one of the first ones that I had done, and I had gone only on school grounds to do this excursion. So, and I found, like, the kids' photos are all taken on cell phones. These ones are several years old, but they're beautiful. So they're really, it's kind of art as well as geography. There's a few more slides. So one of them was, your rain, you fell at Riverdale. Where are you going to go? What's going to happen to you? And so the next couple of slides are just showing some of the results with rain. That's like a reflection in a puddle, upside down reflection in a puddle. And the next slide. So with grade 9 geography, I did landscape as systems, habitat, nature, culture. You can look at it from any lens you want. This is Greenwood Park, and this is somewhere where we'd visit often. That was a quick walk from the school, and they did see it. I did it all year long, and they did see the differences in the seasons as well. And the next slide. So that was just one example of one class's worth of work. But I've also taken, say, Earth and Space Science kids out to look for different things. So really, the sky's the limit. The tips I have are start small. So start off with just using your school grounds. And actually my biggest tip is tell them on the first day that you're going to go outside every day, or maybe not every day if you are uncomfortable. But what I did was I walked in, I said, I want to take them outside every Friday. I'm going to tell them today that I'm going to do this. And then they are like, you said you were doing this. So it helps to keep yourself accountable, and just use the school grounds. So just go around the school grounds and practice the walking excursion stewardship guidelines that you've told them. So another thing that was important was to not make a big racket in the hallway, because then we can't, like, just basically you can't have nice things if we can't follow the rules type of thing. So being quiet in the hallway and being prepared. So on Fridays, make sure you have your jacket with you. I do give them the opportunity to get their jacket. I mean, now with COVID, I don't think there's any lockers or anything like that. So they should have all of their stuff with them. The bathroom hasn't really been an issue because we only had 75-minute classes. So I would give them the opportunity beforehand. The one thing that I'm thinking might be a little bit tricky with COVID might be if someone comes quite late to a class, because they're 4 hours. So it's different than someone being, 5 minutes late to a class where we wouldn't have left yet. You do need to communicate with the office and make sure they know that you're going out, and make sure in COVID that there's not other classes going out at the exact same time. Don't be intimidated. You don't have to be an expert. Just do it. And especially in secondary, they have a totally different perspective, and it's their neighborhood most of the time that they're in, and they can see that from a really different lens. It's okay to not know what's going to happen or what to expect. I didn't expect I honestly want to hang the pictures on my wall that the students have taken, and it's definitely not what I thought. So just don't overthink it and be like, well, I can't do this because I don't know enough about this park or that park, and I'm not really sure. Just do it, and make sure your timing is good. So if you get out, especially you could get quite far afield in 4 hours, just make sure you're back on time. And also let the students use their own timing as well. So at Greenwood Park, I would say, okay, we're looking through this lens, go meet back here in this amount of time, and they could set a timer on their phone and be back. And this is just like a general tip think with the end in mind when you ask students to create a product to showcase their findings. So make sure it doesn't end up being like a piece of landfill after. So the digital aspect is kind of good because it doesn't have any waste. And the next slide. For 2020, it can just even be we're going for a walk. So we don't have any lunchtime. We have a 3 hour and 45-minute class. So that could be the nutritional break. So we're bringing our snacks outside, and we're going to go outside and have a snack and come back in. And it doesn't have to be a lesson. Think about what you might do outside. I know Steve was saying, just if you're going to read in class, why not read outside? Art labs, biology, plant unit. There's so many, chemistry, get some water from a real source or snow or whatever. Use individual outdoor experiences for the asynchronous learning block. So in some of my e-learning classes with Earth and Space Science, I've had them take their own pictures of physical features that they had to analyze. So getting their assignment, asynchronous assignment, to be go outside, find this thing, take a picture of it. And yeah, the 4 hour block, I think I'm actually very excited to, maybe you get out to the Don Valley. It's not too far of a walk, but it would be too far in a 75-minute class. So that's everything.
Thanks, Karen. Sorry for my mouse moved. There's so many ideas again for secondary. I'm just going to launch the polling as we wrap up in terms of whether the webinar has met your needs. So feel free to add your thoughts there. On the screen, you're seeing the upcoming webinars. As we mentioned, we're going to be focusing on eco-justice. So social justice through urban farming. And if you remember Ian Crosby, he's an amazing webinar presenter. Land-based learning, eco-justice education. And then, of course, we have previous webinars that are accessible on the EcoSchools TDSB EcoSchools site, and maybe Jen or Chris can put that link up again. Wonderful. So we will be sending you the recorded version, the chat, because there's so much wisdom there. And of course, in the recorded, you could see all the slides that were shown, albeit very quickly, some of them. But we hope that you've enjoyed this webinar. It looks like many of you have, and there's so many ideas. I want to thank you so much to our presenters. Oh my goodness. Each of you could have given a webinar yourselves with your expertise and the depth of knowledge you have. And so many inspiring different examples. And, Christiana, you've inspired me. Think high, the sky is the limit, and just get out there. give yourself patience to start small, do it well, and then work with your kids, because it does, as Trish says, it does take 28 days to start a new habit. So take time to do that. Thank you, big thank you to David for giving us the background on the admin part. Again, knowing that we can use our parks now without permits, unless we're using something regularly, the principal might be connecting with the planning department. Use your walking excursion forms, and then look forward to our next webinar on September 22nd, where we'll really talk about what environmental ed could look like during this pandemic, both getting outside and what it looks like virtually and in the classroom. So I look forward to seeing some of you again. And if we'll be staying on for a few, if you have more questions, please let us know. Yes, so thank you.